Welcome back to Getting Started with SPSS Syntax. In part 2, we're looking at making sense of SPSS syntax. Now earlier, we pasted this syntax from a frequencies dialog. If we take a moment to look at it in a bit more detail now, we can see that in fact it consists of two separate procedures. The first procedure is denoted by a Dataset Activate command, and the second procedure is denoted by the frequencies command, which in this case was being applied to the variable jobcat. Let's take a moment to talk about that Dataset Activate command, as it causes a lot of confusion among new users of SPSS. So when you open a new data file in SPSS statistics, it gives it a label, and it labels it $dataset1 by default. If you open a second data file, given the fact that you can open more than one data file at a time, it labels it as $dataset2, and it continues to add a sequential number to each new data file that is opened. And that's useful because when a command such as frequencies is executed, SPSS wants to know which file that you've got currently open it should apply to. And that's why you'll see the Dataset Activate command occurring right at the top of a syntax job, right at the top of the syntax window, because it's basically saying a dataset has been opened. We're going to call that dataset Dataset1, and all subsequent syntax should apply to Dataset1 until, of course, another dataset is opened, in which case you could activate that dataset, be Dataset2, and all subsequent commands within the syntax window would apply to that, as you so desire. The exception to this is when the user has requested that SPSS only opens one dataset at a time. So that's a setting that you can actually activate by going to Edit Options within the main menu. And that will open up a dialog with lots of tabs. If you go to the General tab and simply check the box marked Open Only One Dataset at a Time, it looks like this, then that means that you won't be able to open multiple datasets at a time. And that means that every time a dataset is opened, the previous one's closed. And as a result of that, every dataset is simply labeled $dataset, not $dataset1, not $dataset2. In which case, of course, the Dataset Activate command can be ignored or even deleted because, of course, you can't open more than one dataset at a time, and therefore you don't have to pay attention to the Dataset Activate command. Okay, having dealt with that, let's turn our attention to the frequencies command. So the frequencies command, as we can see here, consists of a number of color-coded elements which make up the procedure itself. Now, in fact, this is quite a simple procedure. It doesn't have that many different elements to it, and a lot of them are actually optional. It prints more, it pastes more than it actually needs to make the command work. But if we were to use this as a little template to explain the structure of SPSS syntax, it serves its purpose quite well. The first thing that we need to be aware of is that syntax commands begin with a single command word or term, which in this case happens to be frequencies. If it was a crosstab, it would start with crosstabs, regression with regression, compute with compute, recode with recode. The second one is actually an optional keyword. This is variables. It simply says, okay, we're going to run a frequencies procedure on the following variables, and then it has an equal sign after that. And we could have one or more variables. In this case, we have the variable name, the name of the field, not the label, jobcat. We could have put in the variable gender there if that's also in the dataset, jobcat space gender, jobcat space gender space age group, and it would do frequency tables on those three different fields, those three different variables independently. And the last one is kind of very much a default formatting command, which refers to the statistics table that you get at the start of a frequencies table. You have an option here to do order by analysis and order by variable, and it just basically means whether or not you get a separate statistics table for each variable or whether you get one single summary statistics table for all of the variables that you've listed in your frequencies command, followed by individual frequencies tables. You don't actually need it to make the command run. It's just one of these optional sub-commands which is pasted by default with this frequencies procedure. But the last element is quite important. The last element is a single period character. This is known as the command terminator. So when SPSS executes a procedure, executes a bit of syntax, it looks for the command word, which in this case is frequencies, and it looks for a period symbol at the end, and that denotes the start and the end of the procedure. Now, in fact, even if the period symbol is missing, it doesn't completely crash. It may generate a little alert and say, listen, the period here, the terminal character here is missing. Do you want me to proceed anyway? And it will actually proceed anyway. So even then, it's not terribly fussy. Finally, just before we do a quick demo, you should be aware that if you just want to run a specific procedure within the syntax window, you can do so simply by highlighting that procedure and then clicking this little green play button, and that runs just that specific selection. Okay, so here we have an SPSS syntax window open, and the first thing I want to show here is that this dataset command here has other subcommands, not just activate, but you can have dataset name. It doesn't have to be in capital letters, it's not case sensitive. Dataset name. We could change the name of the dataset. You can see there's only one dataset open here. It's saying active dataset, dataset 1. We could change it to something else like YouTube. And highlighting, just run that selection by highlighting it and say run selection, clicking the green button, or going to run selection. Click the green button, come back to the syntax window. You can see now that the active dataset is now called YouTube. And of course, if we want to run just the frequencies procedure, we can run that. There's the frequencies procedure run, come back to syntax. If you wanted to change this and change the field name, a good tip is just to highlight the field name here and go to utilities variables. You can choose other fields, like if I choose gender here and control click to choose age group and hit paste, it pastes them in, replacing that original field. Highlight that again, run again. Now we have gender of employee showing as a frequency table and age group shown as a frequency table as well. And again, to demonstrate the fact that the frequencies procedure, which is actually pasted here, is somewhat more verbose than it's necessary, to show you can actually get away with much shorter commands. I'm just going to type a much shorter command that does the same thing. So I'm going to type freak and just put jobcat, just literally the command and jobcat. Now it doesn't activate, it doesn't highlight it or parse it in any way, but if I click that and just hit run, it still runs the procedure for me. That's just a sort of shorthand, old school way of doing stuff, and it demonstrates that you don't necessarily need to have a lot of the default pasted subcommands that you get when you hit the paste button within a dialog. Finally, in this section, just a few things to note about SPSS syntax in general. Generally speaking, it's remarkably unfussy about how it's typed. It's generally not case sensitive, and you can use as many lines as you want to specify a single command. And it doesn't even normally require things like correct indentation to run. And there are many occasions where 3 or 4 letter abbreviations can be used for many command specifications. However, there are a few rules. Each new command, such as frequencies or crosstabs or compute, must start on a new line. And each procedure should really end with a command terminator, i.e. a full stop. So it starts with a command word, it ends with a full stop, and that constitutes the full procedure. Most subcommands are separated by slashes. These are optional elements within the procedure itself, but the slash before the first subcommand in the procedure is actually usually optional.